Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are right now. Today we have a very special day at GPQ, special in many regards. On the one hand, we have a very special guest, and I emphasize very and special. And on the other hand, I am usually on the interviewee side rather than on the interviewer side. So this is also rather new for me, but I thought I could not lose the opportunity that I had to interview, as I mentioned, this very special guest, Mr. Bradley Birkenfeld, which is considered one of the most significant financial whistleblowers in history, or the most significant. And it's the author of a book that will come out soon called Lucifers, Banker and Censored: The Untold Story of How I Destroyed Swiss Bank Secrecy. As you can imagine, we're talking big figures, a big issue, a very relevant issue at any point in time in terms of how the funds of taxpayers are being used abroad, or misused abroad, if one could say. After, as an international private banker, he exposed how UBS, the world's largest bank, helped ultra-wealthy Americans commit billions of dollars in tax fraud. After many legal problems that he'll probably tell us about, Brad was vindicated with a record-breaking reward of $104 million. His work has enabled the U.S. Treasury to recover as much as $25 billion in back taxes, fines, and penalties. So you can now gather why I had mentioned the fact that our guest is special. Anyway, before we talk about your book, Brad, let us talk about whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are not always seen in the best light possible. Many people, depends by whom. One side probably sees them as saviors and heroes. The other side will see them as people just loudly looking for fame or for money. My first question is basically, what motivated you to become a whistleblower, and the risks involved? Because I'm certain there are many risks involved.
Well, thank you for having me, Omar. It's a delight to be here, and I'm sure your audience is quite eager to learn about what goes on behind the scenes in these nefarious offshore jurisdictions, such as Switzerland, where I work for UBS. Your question with respect to whistleblowing is a very important one, because whistleblowing is actually an extension of law enforcement. If anyone can just think logically, whether we trust the police and law enforcement or we distrust them for whatever reason, a whistleblower will actually aid and assist in that process of bringing people to justice. So that's the first thing to understand, not just the skunk at the picnic as everyone tries to portray them as. And whistleblowers are on the inside, so they're probably the best suited person to understand all the complexities of what goes on with really an investigation. You're really trying to solve a crime, but you actually have someone on the inside who witnessed that crime. And what caused me to come forward? Well, as a director at UBS, and I managed around $450 million for clients, the problem was this, is that what we did in Switzerland was legal. The problem was when my colleagues and I from Geneva, Lugano, and Zurich in Switzerland would travel to the US, that was a gray area, but it was actually illegal because we weren't allowed to market to the US without a proper license. The bank didn't really care, so they were trying to cover it up, and they hid that. So a colleague of mine came across an internal document on our intranet, and he showed it to me. And that's exactly what it was a document we were never told about, we were never trained on, but yet it was there. So you can see that they were setting us up to fail, and they would have plausible deniability. I challenged that, and I came forward, and that's really the impetus to becoming a whistleblower within UBS at that time in 2005.
Yes, an incredible story. I've been watching your videos and trying to follow the difficulties you have had in that path and the risks involved, because there's a lot of personal risks involved. I'm sure of that. I was curious about the press. I am personally very adamant about the fact that we have lost a lot of neutrality in the press today. I'm not the only one. Many people are aware of that, of certain oligopolies or monopolies, however you want to call them, in terms of press, and how these have affected press freedom and how they can portray things very different to what they actually are. How has the press been? Has it been behaved, if one would like to call that behavior, different in different countries, or how has the press actually welcomed or unwelcomed your ideas and your information?
Omar, that's a very good question. I think any whistleblower should realize that they need certainly good legal counsel, certainly have the facts and documents to prove it, but also the other component is good media coverage, because the media will represent or misrepresent the whistleblower. In my case, I actually entrusted a reporter at the Financial Times in Zurich by the name of Haig Simonian. And I talk about him in my book. And Haig I used the code name, and the code name was Tarantula. And he thought this was some sort of game or something. He later found out, because I was sending him confidential documents by facsimile from the post office, never from my home, he then began to realize that I was giving him the biggest case he had ever reported on. So I trusted him, number one. I knew the organization, the Financial Times, is generally trustworthy. This was back in 2006. And he felt as though he could confide in me using a code name. Later, it came out, of course, that he wrote an article that was very accommodating of me, that said, I understand why he used the code name, because he was taking such great risks, but yet he was still providing me with factual evidence, factual information, and supporting it. So I think that Haig was a very good example, and I picked the right person. When things blew up, of course, in the United States, and my own government attacked me because they didn't do their own job, there were certain media groups that you really find out that are in bed with the government, and they report the government story. So if they do it right, the government says, we'll give you another story the next time, but do it our way this time. And this was very troubling, and I had to find this out the hard way. But certainly I narrowed it out and began to take reporters who were much more knowledgeable, much more honest. And believe it or not, most of them were outside the United States, in Mexico, in Canada, in the UK, in France, in Germany, and so forth. So I found, and Norway, of course, they were very, very open-minded. They wanted to know the facts. They didn't want to just have a sensational story. And I think that's what really made me feel comfortable in dealing with the European and the northern folks from the US, Canada, and the southern folks in Mexico. And I found that very, very heartwarming, because people want the truth told. Whistleblowers want the truth told, but you certainly don't want to then have to confront a media that's corrupted.
Indeed. I think it's very, very interesting. Somehow there's some candid people outside the boundaries of where the problem is actually taking place. You have some candidness around that one has to build upon. I agree fully. Now, Brad, let's talk about your book, Lucifers, Banker and Censored, The Untold Story of How I Destroyed Swiss Bank Secrecy. I understand you're launching it very soon, in some days, and you're traveling around to promote it around the world. Tell us more about your book.
Well, it's an interesting book. I first published the book back in 2016, and I self-published because nobody wanted to touch the issues that were in this epic story. And I then took my book to Europe as well and started to publish it in Germany, in Italy, France, Greece, Russia, Romania, and so forth, and Japan. And why was that done? That was because it was such a strong story outside the United States. But what I had in the book about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, they didn't want to print that. They felt as though that was an undue advantage for President or candidate Trump at the time. So then what happened was I did publish it, and it was actually very instrumental, and it helped Donald Trump become president, which I think is a good thing. Why? Because actually Hillary Clinton is a fraud, as is Barack Obama. And I don't use that term lightly. I justify it in my book. I have documents to support it. But I also met with Julian Assange twice at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And that's in the book as well. And people will shed more light on this story to understand that I got it right from the horse's mouth, as we say. I have a document that was a WikiLeaks cable that proved that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton found a political solution to the UBS case. It's on my website, people can see it, and it's in my new book. But more than that, what I've done in this new book, it was from 2016 to now, 2020. So 4 years have elapsed. And what is in the new book? There's obviously a new cover, there's new quotes, there's new documents, there's new content, and there's new photographs, and so forth. But the cases that are in there are things such as the UBS trial in Paris, France, where I testified for 10 hours, and they got a 5.1 billion euro verdict, a massive amount of money, a historic first, under appeal, of course. I will be attending the appeal in March of 2021 in Paris. But more than that was my 2 meetings with Julian Assange, the corruption with the Greek and Canadian governments that covered up the investigations and did nothing. I gave them the entire case and they did nothing. In addition, I met with MI5 from the UK. I met them in Germany and they did nothing. And then, of course, I had other cases of information that I gave regarding other situations within the book, such as Igor Lenikov, one of my clients, who now he is paying state income taxes. And of course, the most revealing part was meeting with the psychiatrist of Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, who's running for president. This was very, very informing, and people must wonder, why does that have to do with banking? It's more to do with whistleblowing, because he was based in the Boston area where I grew up, and this was a very important part of the book. And what we've seen today in Washington is a very big report by Senator Grassley and Ron Johnson about the corruption by Hunter Biden in China and Ukraine, which dovetails with what I've written in my book already. And this is very, very important. And I think your audience will be very eager to see, why is Hunter and Joe Biden so corrupt? The mainstream media won't report on this. But if you look in my book, you'll see the facts. And if you look on what happened in Washington, D.C. today, those are facts. And the third thing I would ask your audience to look at is a documentary by Peter Schweitzer. Peter Schweitzer did Clinton Cash. And the video is called Riding the Dragon. It's a 40-minute documentary on YouTube. You can just download it and watch it. If you combine that with what's in my book and what's happened today in Washington, you'll be shocked to think that Joe Biden could even be on the ballot to run for president of the United States.
Very, very interesting. I am the first one looking forward to getting to read your book. I think indeed, and I see some. I feel at a very lower degree, of course, some of the things that you feel. I published myself in 2013 a book about a different subject, but it was the presence of Iran and Hezbollah in Latin America. And people thought that I was first out of my mind, that was impossible. And today we see, many years later, that they are very much in the region, and nobody wanted to publish it. So I had to go my own way, and little by little gain some ground, and credibility is gained in the process. No? And that path, if one is sure of that, the thing that you mentioned, facts. Facts are there, whether mainstream media wants to publish or not. But what one has to do the work. If it's there, let people be more criterious about what they read and what they consume every day, particularly from mainstream media. And if they want to get to the truth, at least to see the two sides of because the truth is, there's truths for some and truths for others. No, that's
the other. Yes, and one thing just to add to your earlier question, getting to the truth is very important, hence why whistleblowers eradicate waste, fraud, and corruption in society. But in my chapter, in my new book, Lucifers Banker Censored, I also have filed a lawsuit against Kevin Costner, the actor, and Leonard Lauder, the billionaire, who is the heir to the Estee Lauder companies. And you may ask, why are you doing this? Well, because they both had secret offshore accounts at UBS in Geneva. If you ask them, they won't admit it. But when you read my book and see who interviewed them 10 years ago and asked them this question, Brian Ross, the investigative reporter, you'll see that I told the truth. I told the IRS, I told the SEC, I told the DOJ, I told the US Senate. Kevin Costner, Leonard Lauder had offshore illegal numbered accounts in Switzerland. Further, if I put it in my first book and then they attacked my publisher and we had to withdraw it. So I not only put it in and had it withdrawn and 10,000 books were destroyed, but 4 years later, I've now got a new publisher and I put it back into this book and I filed a lawsuit in the state of Florida. So who would you trust? The people who are saying we never had an account, or the man who worked at the bank who took sworn affidavits and submitted them in this lawsuit, as well as told the 4 government agencies, IRS, SEC, DOJ, and US Senate. The truth is clear. I'm telling the truth, and they don't want to admit the truth.
I think definitely that's a book that we all have to read, at least those, as I mentioned, that want to get, and as you mentioned, that want to see the facts and get down to the truth, the very hard fact truth, which is what people usually avoid amid this very sweet talk of mainstream media, of course. Another question, Brad, we're clearly at a very important moment in time in terms of the future of the world, I would say, and I am myself a geopolitical analyst and am very analytical, sorry to be redundant, of the way in which things are developing prior to the US elections on November 3rd. It is a crucial moment, I think, the most crucial from my point of view since the end of the Cold War, since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Many things are being defined. The Western culture on the one hand, borders, immigration, multiculturality, globalization, its effects, world commerce, world trade, and then we get the virus. It's a very, very, very unique juncture. And in that context, I would like to ask you 2 questions. Did this determine in any way the timing of the publishing of your book? That would be the first one in that context. And what do you think about the effect or impact or what do you desire the impact to be, or have you foreseen any in this context, any repercussions either on you or on public opinion or on others, etc.?
Well, those are 2 great questions. I'm happy to answer those. I've never been to Colombia, and I look forward to coming there because I think your country has a lot to offer, not only in sophistication, but also in history and culture. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your show, it's because I have a lot of friends who are from Colombia, and I'd like to come and visit. But Colombia, like many other countries in South America, have a Latino presence, as we say in America. And that Latino vote is a very big, important vote now for this upcoming election. Certainly the Black vote, as we say in America, the woman vote, the Latino vote, and so on and so forth. And why I'm saying this is because the timing of this book is important because it gains traction and attention about Hunter Biden and about people that were protected by Barack Obama and Joe Biden during this UBS scandal. You have to understand, and your audience must understand something. This was the largest and longest running tax scandal in the world. Just at UBS, we had 19,000 Americans, $20 billion in assets. So you can imagine, this was the rich and powerful people of America, CEOs, millionaires and billionaires, politicians, lawyers, and so on and so forth. So by exposing this, what Obama and Biden covered up with Hillary Clinton's assistance is scandalous. And it's scandalous for several reasons. It's because our tax and securities laws were undermined. So having this book come out at this time, and I agree with Donald Trump. I agree with him that he's been attacked unfairly. I'm not saying that everyone loves Donald Trump. They don't, and that's fine. We all have a choice. But the term Crooked Hillary derives from the story that I exposed at UBS, because Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton benefited from the cover-up that they achieved on not getting all the names from UBS. They only got 4,700 names out of 19,000, which is a 75% failure rate. They did not fund the bank properly to make the US taxpayers whole. They let everybody go in UBS. There were no indictments, no prison terms. Even the bank was let off. The only person that they went after was me, the whistleblower. and put me in jail. So you can imagine to see that this makes no sense. And to your Colombian and your Latino audience, they would say, this is what they did to this gentleman who brought this to their attention, and without me, they never would have had it. So what you begin to realize quickly is, who can trust Barack Obama and Joe Biden? It's the largest scandal in which 300 million Americans were cheated by Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And this is very serious.
Very, 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 very serious. I personally, let me pick on the fact that the press coverage of Donald Trump, which I often say does not have the oral and verbal abilities of Barack Obama, certainly, but he's a very frank person. He says things as they are, and sometimes things as they are not nice.
Well, that's what happens in politics, Omar. You're absolutely correct. You know, it's like the little baby saying, oh, the woman's fat, or you have bad breath, or something like this as a child. It's
very frank, but many people criticize hypocrisy and look for frankness and for trustworthiness, but when they have it, they don't appreciate it, and that's unfortunate. And the role of the press in this regard is definitely very negative in these times. I always say, in the era of information, we're in the moment where we could have much more access to information, have a much more construed and rich ideas and opinions, right? But unfortunately, there's this media factor that comes across. Just deviating a bit from our talk, you live in Malta. At first, I was not sure if you were still there. I was in Malta in the 1980s. By coincidence, in reality, I was a student in Belgium and decided to go for a holiday to the closest and warmest place possible to try to feel a little bit of the Caribbean so far away, which I was missing. And I ended up in Malta, which is a fantastic place in many regards, particularly from the historical point of view. That I watched an interview of yours in CNN, and you mentioned that. But tell us about Malta, and tell us about precisely that valuable archipelago, I would say, that people have in the middle of the Mediterranean that many ignore. It exists.
Well, it is quite a unique place in the world. For those of you who traveled and seen it, and your audience should certainly Google Malta. It has a wonderful ambiance and the history, of course. And here in Malta, it's 3 little islands, as you know, but it's been occupied by so many regimes, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Ottomans, the French, the British, and so on and so forth. It was very strategic in World War II, and even before that, some of the earlier wars, the Great Siege of 1565 by the Turks who invaded, and the Maltese, the Knights of Malta, were outnumbered 10-1 and still succeeded in beating them. So this is a very strategic location south of Sicily, north of Libya. So you can see it was a trade route. And quite frankly, if you look into it closely, in the island of Gozo, they have some of the oldest man-made structures in the world. Not Egypt, not Rome, not Greece, but in Gozo. Quite fascinating, actually.
They have this capital, Rabat. Rabat is not the capital. I was mixing it with Morocco, but Rabat, the old town, I remember, which is amazing. It's amazing.
And Mdina and Valletta and some of these wonderful little coastal cities. But what's nice about Malta is it's literally a rocky island. And the water's crystal clear, beautiful water. There's not much industry here, of course. And the weather is superb, as you know. And, well, we welcome you back, Omar. Come back and visit.
Oh, I'm looking forward. I even happened to meet a person from Malta working here for a shipping company, and we had so much to talk about. I'm surely looking forward to visiting you there, of course.
Sure.
Now, really, one last question. I say this is the last after the last. One could say that you're a very wealthy person, indeed, or a wealthy person, and you could have chosen to live a very tranquil life, like so many people dream, on a beach, here in Colombia. Why not? You would be cordially invited. You decided to take the opposite path of serenity and tranquility that everybody longs for during all of their lives. There's certainly a lot of life lessons that you have acquired during all this, transiting this difficult path. Things like loyalty, hypocrisy, friendship, trustworthiness, and how has this contributed to building your character today, what you are today, basically?
Well, that's a great question. I think when you read my new book, I write a lot about that, about growing up in Boston, the youngest of 3 boys in a family, a loving family. I was educated, I traveled, I had a good life. I'm not going to deny that. But what had really sparked my curiosity once I had taken this courageous step to come forward as a whistleblower. And people have to understand, this is very important, that I resigned from UBS. I was not fired. And I resigned before the whistleblowing law in America was passed, a year and a half actually before it was passed. So I didn't do it for the money because there was no law at the time I resigned. And I gave up $1 million salary with bonus at that time in 2006. So it's important for people to understand that. But what I do now is take great pride and energy in taking my story and providing it to others, educating and inform maybe the younger generation, other countries like Colombia, advising law enforcement, bankers, lawyers, accountants, trustees. Why? Because if my story just goes away, then we lose a great opportunity to educate the youth. And we must carry this forward. We must not let this die on the vine, as we say. So this is why I'm excited to publish my book in Spanish, get it into the Latino market, of course, so people understand exactly what goes on in big corporations, corrupt governments, and so forth. But then to lecture and give Q&As and interviews like this. Why? Because this is really the best lesson in life that we can learn. As adults, we have to teach the next generation to do the right thing. And what I also tell people is this: no matter what kind of family you were brought up in, if you were rich or poor, smart or not as intelligent or whatever, great in sports or not great in sports, if you see something wrong, you must say something, because silence is complicity in anything. So this is very important in life as a good society. We want to have a good society of children who grow, they're educated, they eat well, they play sports, and they get along with others. Hopefully that works. But yet, if we do not clean up the corruption within our society, both in the public and private sector, we're doomed, because that will foster new corruption, and it's like a cancer, it will grow. And I think that's where we have a duty to stop this.
I agree 100%, Brad. I agree 100%, particularly these countries. Corruption is all over the place, of course, but if these countries mixed with all this drug trafficking and transnational crime, etc., corruption is, of course, very big in proportion. We're a bit the most corrupt countries in the world, very unfortunately. And indeed, it has a life of its own. Now, people don't understand that it has a life of its own. It's a monster that grows, that is fed continuously, and unless you stop feeding it by exposing some of those things that particularly have a bearing of everybody's lives, because corruption affects us all. So I think it is a duty. I agree, and I think it is admirable the way that you have taken on that duty. I congratulate you for your book. I'm going to be one of the first ones to read it, of course, in English, in Spanish, and is there any Maltese local language that you will translate it in or something?
Not into Maltese, but it will be out in English at the end of the month, but certainly we're excited to get it translated and published in Spanish, because the Spanish market is not only an educated market, but a curious market. And I'm looking forward to coming down there and lecturing for free and educating and informing the people there. And I think this is an exciting endeavor.
Okay, thank you very much, Brad. Thank you very much for the time. It has been very, very useful, very fruitful, I think. I hope that your message can spread, that people buy your book. I congratulate you for your courage, your persistence, which is, I think, one of the main characteristics of whistleblowers. And I also hope that people have another, now after this conversation, have another image of what a whistleblower really is, and the very positive function it can play in today's very, 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 I would say, confusing times, not saying complex times. So I think it's important that we take into account every element of information that can clarify the truth for each one of us. I thank you very, very much. I know it's late in Malta. I am quite envious right now, to tell you the truth, because Bogota, where I am, is 2,600 meters above sea level, and it's, although we are very close to the equator, it is cold in general. So, and I am a hot weather person. I lived in Africa and the Middle East, many hot countries, Sudan, Somalia, Egypt, Iraq, etc. in the past. So I love, and my family is half Caribbean, so I envy you, but very, very
well,
healthy envy.
The invitation's always open, and I hope your audience has the time to check my website, lucifersbanker.com. And under the country section, there's articles in Spanish. Under the Spanish flag, you can see German, French, Italian, and so forth. But there are some articles in Spanish, about 10 of them, from the original book. And I think that will help your audience understand better in your local language exactly what I did and the unprecedented actions that caused the destruction of Swiss bank secrecy.
Right. Thank you again. We'll publish this interview anyway with Spanish subtitles, so it will take 1 or 2 days for it to come out. I thank you very much again for your time, and I hope we can see each other again, even personally in the future, with a mask or without a mask. Now in COVID times, but I'm very glad to meet you, and please do keep in touch. I hope everybody gets access to your book, and send you a big hello from Colombia and from Latin America. Thank you again.
Omar, muchas gracias. Thank you, and God bless to all your audience.
God bless you, Brad. Thank you again.
Thank you.